I'm sitting here in my apartment, suitcase still half unpacked on the floor, and I can't stop staring at it. The clothes still smell like sunscreen and ocean air, but for me they might as well be crime scene evidence. Because the truth is, that trip wasn't a vacation. It was a setup. One moment, I thought we were planning forever. The next, I realized I'd been flown into my own heartbreak. My name is Emma. I'm 27 years old. And for the last year, I thought I was in a healthy, committed relationship. He wasn't just my boyfriend. He was the man I pictured building a future with. Let's just call him Neil. That's not his real name, but it's close enough. And honestly, who he is doesn't matter nearly as much as what he did. If you saw us from the outside, you'd think we were solid, the kind of couple people described as goals, weekend brunches, inside jokes that made everyone else roll their eyes. He even came to my family's holiday dinner last year and charmed my mom with stories about fixing things around the house, the kind of man who seemed dependable, steady, safe, and that's exactly what I thought I needed. Because before Neil, my love life was a storm. Guys who disappeared, guys who couldn't commit, guys who were more interested in being admired than being known. By the time Neil came along, I told myself I wanted boring. I wanted reliable. And when he looked at me across that crowded rooftop bar where we first met, I thought, maybe this is the man who proves that good guys still exist. For the longest time, he played the part perfectly. He texted me good morning. He showed up when he said he would. He had this way of making me feel like the future was already mapped out. Dinners in, weekends away, quiet talks about where we might live if we moved in together. So when he surprised me with the idea of a trip, just the two of us, to celebrate almost a year together, I didn't hesitate. I thought, this is it, the milestone I'd been waiting for. I let myself imagine that maybe this was the prelude to something bigger. Maybe he was going to propose. I know how naive that sounds now, sitting here surrounded by half-folded clothes and half-broken dreams, but at the time, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Who wouldn't believe it? Because here's the thing about Neil. He wasn't careless. He wasn't sloppy. He knew how to weave a story so tight, you never thought to pull at the thread. And I was so eager to believe in him, so desperate to have something stable, that I ignored the tiny voice in the back of my head whispering that maybe, just maybe, not everything added up. I pushed that voice aside when he changed the subject a little too quickly. I brushed it off when he made excuses about long workdays that left him drained. And I definitely silenced it when he told me this trip was exactly what we needed, to unplug, to reconnect, to celebrate us. So I packed my suitcase with sundresses and optimism. I imagined us on the beach, laughing over cocktails, building memories we'd tell our kids about one day. I boarded that plane thinking I was stepping into a new chapter. Instead, I was walking straight into a story I didn't know I'd been cast in. Because the truth is, that trip wasn't just about us. And I would only discover that when another woman, her name was Nicole, walked into the same resort bar where Neil and I were sitting, looked him dead in the eye, and said words that turned my whole world upside down. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand how devastating that moment was, you need to know what came before it. You need to see why I believed him, why I defended him, why I ignored every warning sign until it was too late. Because people will say I should have known, that the signs were there, that I was blind, or desperate, or stupid. Maybe I was all three. But I wasn't crazy. And I'm done letting him or anyone else paint me that way. This is my story, my side. And if you're willing to hear it, I'll tell you how paradise turned into the place I lost everything. Before you judge me, before you roll your eyes and think another girl who ignored the obvious, I need you to understand something. I wasn't the paranoid girlfriend. I wasn't the type to check phones, to demand passwords, to accuse someone of cheating just because they came home late. That's never been me. But Neil, let's keep calling him that, was the kind of man who made you not want to question. He had this way of sounding so calm, so logical, that if you even hinted at suspicion, you ended up feeling guilty for asking. He'd look me in the eyes and say, "Emma, you know I'd never hurt you." And the way he said it wasn't defensive. It was steady, soothing, like a man who had nothing to hide. That's why this trip mattered so much. It wasn't just about white sand beaches or fruity cocktails. It was proof. Proof that we were solid enough to travel together, to spend a week in each other's pockets without driving each other crazy. Proof that the relationship wasn't just dinners after work or weekend sleepovers. It was a life, a rhythm, something that could grow into more. It was my first serious vacation with a man. I don't mean weekend getaways or cheap road trips. I mean a real, planned, saved-for stamped passport kind of trip. He told me he wanted to show me the world, and I believed him. So when people say later, "Emma, the signs were there, you should have known," I want to ask them, what would you have done differently? Would you have doubted him when he was holding your hand at the airport, checking in the luggage, smiling like the only thing he wanted was a week with you? Would you have second-guessed him when he leaned over on the plane, kissed your forehead, and whispered, "This is going to be the best trip of our lives"? I know how it sounds, but you'd have believed him too. Because here's the thing, I wasn't chasing him. He was chasing me. He was the one who planned the details, who sent me links to resorts, who counted down the days on his phone like a kid waiting for Christmas. He made me feel chosen, safe. Like this wasn't just a trip, it was a step toward forever. And maybe that's why I defended him so hard later. Why I bit my tongue when the first red flags appeared. Because I'd told my friends, my family, everyone who would listen, that Neil was different, that he wasn't like the others. And when you stake your pride, your reputation, and your heart on someone, it's not easy to admit you were wrong. So before you judge me for what I missed, remember this. Trust doesn't disappear overnight. Suspicion doesn't grow from nothing. It takes cracks, little ones. And at the start of this trip, I couldn't see a single one. At least, not yet. To understand why I fell so hard for Neil, you have to see the life we had before it all shattered. Because from the outside, it looked like everything a girl could want. Our relationship wasn't fireworks and chaos. It was routine, steady, predictable in the best way. He texted me good morning before work, every single day. At lunch, I'd get a photo of whatever sad sandwich he was eating at his desk, with a caption like, "Corporate Gourmet." And at night, he'd call, never missed, just to ask about my day, even if we'd already planned to see each other. It was the kind of attention that doesn't feel like flattery. It feels like commitment, like someone weaving themselves into your life one thread at a time. Weekends were ours. Friday nights usually meant takeout and a bottle of red wine. Saturdays we'd go for walks through the park or tackle errands together, boring things like groceries, laundry, oil changes, that didn't feel boring at all when he was there. Sundays were for brunch, and then him watching football while I sat next to him reading, legs tangled together on the couch. Nothing dramatic, nothing wild, just a rhythm. And after years of disappointment, that rhythm felt like safety. My friends noticed it too. They said I seemed calmer, more grounded. My best friend even joked, "If you two don't end up married, I'll be shocked." And honestly, I thought the same. Neil wasn't just good to me, he was good with the people I loved. He charmed my parents in record time. My mom liked how he always helped carry dishes after dinner without being asked. My dad respected that Neil had a stable job, that he seemed responsible and dependable. And my little niece adored him. She'd crawl into his lap with her picture books, and he'd read them in silly voices that made her giggle. Watching him with her made me picture him as a dad someday, holding our own kids with that same patient smile. It wasn't just my family either. He made an effort with my friends, remembered their birthdays, asked about their jobs. He became woven into my world so completely that sometimes I forgot there was ever a time before him. And he didn't shy away from talking about the future either. There were little promises scattered everywhere, casual, but enough to build a picture in my mind. Like when he pointed out houses on Sunday drives and said, "That one would be perfect for us." Or when he'd joke about how our kids would definitely inherit my stubborn streak and his sarcasm. I know those words are easy to say, but when you hear them often enough, when you see someone showing up for you in all the small, daily ways, you believe them. You start to build your life around them. That's what I did with Neil. So when he suggested the vacation, it didn't feel like some spur-of-the-moment trip. It felt like the next step, a test we were bound to pass. Proof that all those little promises weren't just talk. That's why the stakes were so high for me. This wasn't casual. He wasn't just a boyfriend. He was the man I thought I'd marry. The man I pictured standing at the end of an aisle, waiting for me. And that's what makes the betrayal so hard to swallow. Not just that he lied, but that he made me believe in a future I never stood a chance of having. Because as steady as Neil seemed, he wasn't building a life with me. He was building a cover story, and I was too in love to see it. The first few days of the trip were everything I thought they would be. Sun on our faces, cocktails in hand, late mornings with no alarm clocks. For a while, it really did feel like paradise. Like Neil and I were finally stepping into the life we'd been talking about. But paradise has a way of making you ignore the shadows. The first red flag was small. Almost nothing. On our second night, we had a dinner reservation at one of the nicer restaurants in the resort. I'd spent an hour getting ready, curled my hair, put on the dress I'd bought just for the trip, something I'd never wear back home. I came out of the bathroom, excited, nervous, and there was Neil, on the phone. At first, I thought it was just him wrapping something up, but then 10 minutes turned into 20. I watched him pace the balcony, his hand pressed against his ear like he didn't want me to hear. When I finally asked who it was, he waved me off. "Work stuff, babe. I'll be done soon." We ended up missing the reservation, ate at the buffet instead. He apologized, said he didn't want to bring work into our trip, but there were some things he couldn't ignore. I told myself it was fine, that this was just part of dating a man with a serious job. I'd been with unreliable guys before, guys who didn't care about responsibility, and Neil wasn't like that. So I tucked the disappointment away, smiled, and said it wasn't a big deal. But the next day, it happened again. We were supposed to spend the afternoon snorkeling. I was already in my swimsuit, sunscreen slathered on, waiting by the door with the gear we'd rented. Neil was on the phone again. This time he stepped outside into the hallway, closed the door behind him. When he came back, he looked rattled. Said something came up that we'd have to reschedule. I could feel the irritation bubbling up in my chest, but I swallowed it. I told myself, don't ruin the vacation. Don't be that girlfriend. Don't turn paradise into a fight. So I smiled again. Said we could snorkel tomorrow. Pretended like I wasn't hurt that the thing I'd been looking forward to most was suddenly not happening. It didn't stop there. Over the next few days, little things kept piling up. A late-night walk where he claimed he just needed air, but came back 40 minutes later smelling faintly of cologne, even though we hadn't left the room. A lunch reservation canceled because he wasn't feeling well, only for me to find him later, sitting on a bench outside, staring at his phone like he was waiting for a message. And then there was the body language. Every time his phone lit up, he stiffened. If I was close enough to see the screen, he'd tilt it away. He never used to be like that. Back home, he'd leave his phone on the counter when he showered. Sometimes he'd even ask me to answer if his mom called while he was driving. But on this trip, his phone might as well have been handcuffed to him. The worst was one morning at breakfast. His phone buzzed on the table, and without thinking, I glanced down. Just a reflex. He snatched it up so fast, the fork in his other hand clattered against the plate. I laughed nervously, asked if everything was okay. He smiled, too quickly, and said, "Just work again." Work. Always work. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't about his job, that whoever was on the other end of those messages wasn't a boss or a coworker. And yet, I let it go. Because here's the thing. I didn't want to be the paranoid girlfriend. I didn't want to ruin the one thing I'd been looking forward to for months. My parents had told everyone I was finally with a good man. My friends had said this was the trip. I couldn't bring myself to admit that something might be off, not when the stakes were this high. So I stuffed the doubts down, told myself, Emma, you're overthinking it. Don't sabotage something good. Don't ruin the vacation. I wish I'd listened to my instincts, because those little cracks weren't random. They were the edges of a truth so sharp, it would cut me open before the week was over. It happened on our 5th night, the night that split my life clean in two. We decided to go to the resort bar before dinner. It wasn't anything fancy, just a lounge near the lobby with a piano player and couples clinking glasses. I remember feeling lighter that evening, determined to shake off the unease that had been building. I told myself, stop overthinking, relax, enjoy him. This is your vacation. I was wearing a white sundress that Neil had said he loved. He ordered me a mojito, teased me for always choosing the sweet ones. And for a moment, I let myself believe we were okay. That whatever had been bothering him was really just work. That maybe I was the one dragging shadows into paradise. Then I heard it. "Neil," a woman's voice sharp with surprise. I turned, and there she was, standing just a few feet away, staring at him like she'd seen a ghost. She was pretty, in that effortless way that doesn't try too hard. Dark hair pulled into a low bun, a sunburn across her nose like she'd been at the pool all day, and the way she said his name, there was recognition in it. Familiarity. My stomach dropped. Neil froze. For a split second, his whole face drained of color. Then he forced a smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. Nicole. Wow. Hey. Nicole. She stepped closer, looking between us. What are you doing here? The way she asked it, it wasn't casual. It wasn't, oh hey, small world. It was loaded, demanding, like she had every right to know. I looked at Neil, waiting for him to explain. He laughed lightly, too lightly. Vacation? Just a little getaway. Nicole's eyes flicked to me then. She studied me the way a woman studies another woman when she already knows the answer but needs confirmation. Her expression hardened. I could feel my pulse hammering in my ears. Do you know each other? I asked, my voice shaky. Neil jumped in fast. Oh yeah, we've crossed paths a few times. Nicole's, an old friend. Old friend? Nicole let out a small laugh, cold, disbelieving. Is that what we're calling it now? She said, her eyes locked on him. The air went thick. The piano player's tune blurred into noise. I felt the ground shift under me, but I forced a smile, desperate to keep control. So, you two know each other from where? Neil was quick. Work. It was years ago. Nothing important. Nicole tilted her head, still looking at him. Years ago? Funny, because last year you and I were supposed to come here together. Remember? Same resort. Same bar. The words hit me like a punch. I turned to Neil. Is that true? His jaw tightened. She's exaggerating. Nicole, come on, don't do this. Nicole crossed her arms, shifting her weight. Exaggerating? You booked the flights. You picked the dates. We only didn't go because your work emergency came up at the last minute. Her eyes snapped back to me. Does that sound familiar? My throat went dry. I looked at Neil, desperate for him to deny it, to give me something. Anything. He placed his hand over mine on the table, his grip firm, almost urgent. Emma, don't listen to this. She's confused. Obsessed. We ended things a long time ago, and she's still not over it. Nicole let out a sharp laugh. Obsessed? You were in my bed 3 months ago, Neil? Or did you forget that too? The words sliced through me. People at nearby tables turned their heads. I could feel their eyes on us, the strangers leaning into our disaster. I yanked my hand from his. Neil, is that true? His voice dropped, low and pleading. She's lying. She's trying to make you doubt me. Don't let her win. Win? As if this was a game. As if my entire relationship, my entire future was just a competition between two women he'd been stringing along. Nicole shook her head, looked at me with something almost like pity. I'm not here to fight with you. I just didn't expect to see him here, with someone else. She glanced back at Neil. Enjoy your vacation. And with that, she turned and walked out of the bar, her drink untouched. I sat there frozen, heart pounding, mind racing. Every nerve in my body screamed that this wasn't nothing, that this wasn't some obsessed ex making a scene, because the look on Neil's face, the fear, the panic, the scramble, told me all I needed to know. But still, I clung to denial. I wanted him to make it make sense. I wanted him to give me a reason, however flimsy, to believe in the man I thought I knew. He leaned closer, whispering, Emma, please, don't let her ruin this for us. Ruin this. As if Nicole was the problem, as if the cracks that had been widening all week hadn't just split open right in front of me. That night, I lay in bed next to him, staring at the ceiling while he slept, his phone clutched tight in his hand. And all I could think was, if she was telling the truth, then everything I believed about us was already a lie. And deep down I knew. Nicole wasn't making this up. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't obsessed. She was me, just living in a different chapter of the same story. And I'd just been handed proof that I wasn't the only one. Back in the room that night, Neil wouldn't let it go. He paced while I sat on the edge of the bed, numb. "Emma, she's crazy," he kept saying. "She's obsessed. She's been trying to sabotage me for years. That's why I cut her off." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to so badly. Because believing him meant the vacation wasn't ruined. It meant the man I loved wasn't living a double life. It meant my future wasn't suddenly a fraud. But Nicole's words echoed in my head. "We were supposed to come here last year. Same resort, same bar." That's not the kind of detail you invent. I asked him outright, "Were you with her 3 months ago?" His answer came fast. Too fast. "Of course not. She's lying. Don't let her manipulate you." Manipulate me. That's how he framed it. Like I was the victim of her, not him. And in my exhaustion, in my desperate need to keep the world from collapsing, I half believed him. But half belief isn't enough to silence the doubts. The next morning, he acted like nothing had happened. Smiled, kissed my forehead, suggested we hit the beach. When I brought up Nicole again, his face hardened. "Emma, if you keep feeding into this, you're going to ruin us. Is that what you want?" So I shut my mouth. I spent the rest of the trip in a fog, smiling for the photos he insisted we take, laughing at jokes that didn't land. Inside, I was screaming. By the time we got back home, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I reached out to my best friend, told her what had happened. She frowned, but her response wasn't what I expected. "Emma, are you sure she wasn't just trying to stir up trouble? Neil doesn't seem like that kind of guy." The words gutted me. I tried another friend, someone who'd always been more skeptical. She didn't even hesitate. "Girl, he's lying. You don't get that panicked over an old friend. Trust your gut." And just like that, the people I counted on were split down the middle. Half believed him, the charming, steady man who always looked put together. The other half believed me, but even their voices weren't enough to drown out the ones planting doubt. That's when I realized the only person who could confirm the truth was Nicole. So I did something Neil would have called crazy. I found her. It wasn't hard. Her name had been dropped in the bar like a bomb. A little social media searching later, I had her profile. Photos of her with friends, with family, normal, happy snapshots, and sprinkled in between, posts that lined up with times Neil had been working late. My chest tightened as I scrolled. I messaged her, half expecting she wouldn't respond. But she did. Quickly. We met in a cafe 2 days later. I remember sitting across from her, hands shaking as I wrapped them around a coffee cup. She was calmer than I expected, almost resigned. She didn't waste time. "I don't want to fight with you. I just think you deserve to know." And then she laid it out. Dates, trips, nights that matched perfectly with Neil's excuses to me. My heart sank with every overlap. The worst part wasn't just the timing, it was the familiarity in her stories. The same lines he'd fed me, he'd fed her, the same promises, the same little rituals, word for word. By the end of it, I wasn't shocked anymore. I was hollow. Nicole reached across the table, her voice quiet. "I didn't want you to find out like that, but you're not crazy. He made me feel the same way, like I was the one losing it." I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. Because in that moment, I realized the truth wasn't up for debate. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't overreaction. It was betrayal. Real, undeniable, mapped out in dates betrayal. And suddenly, the man I thought was my future was nothing more than a stranger who knew how to recycle the same lies in 2 different lives. The timelines weren't just messy. They weren't just overlap. They were identical. When Nicole and I laid it all out, dates, texts, trips, it was like holding up 2 mirrors facing each other. Every promise he made to me, he'd made to her too. Word for word, he told me he wanted to take me to Italy next spring. Nicole leaned forward and said, "Funny, because he told me that too. He called me his safe place." Nicole whispered, "That's what he used to call me." He'd spent holidays with her family when he was supposedly with his cousins. He'd told her he couldn't see her on certain weekends because of work projects. The exact weekends he was with me. Piece by piece, the puzzle assembled itself, and it spelled out one thing. I wasn't his forever. I was his alibi. I think the worst moment was when Nicole hesitated, looked down at her coffee cup, and then finally said, "He promised he was going to propose before the end of the year." I think the worst moment was when Nicole hesitated, looked down at her coffee cup, and then finally said, "He promised he was going to propose before the end of the year." The words sliced me open because I thought I was the one waiting for that. I thought the reason he planned the vacation, the reason he'd been so on edge, was because maybe, just maybe, he was carrying a ring in his luggage. I'd half imagined him dropping to one knee on the beach at sunset, but no, that proposal wasn't meant for me, it was meant for her. I sat there numb while Nicole explained how he'd hinted at ring styles, how he'd joked with her mom about asking for her blessing, and I realized, with a clarity so sharp it hurt, that all the while I was picturing our future, he was rehearsing it with someone else. I wasn't the leading role. I was the understudy, the backup plan, the just-in-case girl he kept warm while he decided who fit his script better. When I left the cafe, I didn't feel like myself anymore. I felt like a ghost drifting through my own life. I walked home, barely noticing the streets, the noise, the world still spinning as mine stood still. Back in my apartment, I collapsed on the bed and stared at the ceiling. The memories rushed in like waves. Every laugh, every kiss, every quiet night tangled up on the couch. It all felt counterfeit now. Not because it hadn't been real for me, but because I could no longer untangle what had been real for him. Was he thinking of her when he held me? Was he texting her in the bathroom while I waited in bed? Was every "I love you" just a recycled line he knew would keep me tethered? I tried to call him that night, desperate for answers, for some scrap of humanity in the wreckage. When he finally picked up, his voice was steady, too steady. "Emma, I didn't want you to find out this way. I demanded the truth. All of it." And after a long pause, he gave me just enough to kill whatever hope I'd been clinging to. "Yes, I told Nicole I wanted to marry her, but that doesn't change how I feel about you. The audacity, the cruelty, as if saying he loved me too was supposed to soften the blow, as if admitting he'd been planning forever with someone else while holding me in the same breath made it less of a betrayal. That was the moment the denial snapped, the moment the floor gave way completely. Because love isn't supposed to sound like, "I wanted you both." It's supposed to sound like, "I choose you," and Neil never chose me. Not really. He chose convenience. He chose cowardice. He chose a double life because he didn't have the courage to risk being alone. And I realized that night, through the tears, through the shaking, through the unbearable grief, that I had never been his partner. I had been his placeholder, and losing him wasn't really a loss. It was the end of an illusion I should never have been cast in to begin with. When the dust settled, there was no explosion, no screaming match in the street, no cinematic revenge, no carefully worded public call-out. Just silence. I didn't slash his tires or post screenshots online. I didn't beg him to choose me or rage at Nicole for being part of the story I never signed up for. I simply blocked his number, packed away the photos, and walked away. It wasn't easy. Walking away never is. Not when your heart is still tangled up in memories that feel real, even after you know they weren't. For weeks, my body betrayed me. I'd wake up expecting a good morning text that never came. I'd glance at my phone during lunch, waiting for his corporate gourmet photos. I'd roll over in bed at night and instinctively reach for the space where he used to sleep. But every time I reached and found nothing, I reminded myself, that's who he really was. Nothing. An empty space dressed up as stability. A man who built 2 lives, not because he loved too much, but because he didn't love enough. So I chose not to fight him, not to defend myself against the whispers or chase the truth through a maze of his excuses. The truth was already clear. And for once, I didn't need him to say it. I believed myself. That's what healing has looked like for me. Not loud gestures, but quiet reclamations. Therapy sessions where I sat across from a stranger and admitted out loud that I ignored my instincts because I wanted so badly to believe. Journals filled with pages of doubts I had silenced, now written down in ink so I'll never forget how real they were. I take walks alone, long ones, where I learned to enjoy my own company again without wondering what he was doing, who he was texting, whose story he was recycling that day. It's a strange kind of freedom, realizing that the collapse of something false doesn't destroy you. It uncovers you. It forces you to remember who you were before you bent yourself into someone else's narrative. And I have remembered. I've remembered that my worth isn't measured by whether a man chooses me, that being loved isn't the same as being respected, that trust isn't gullibility. It's a gift. And the next time I give it, it will be to someone who doesn't just protect it, but honors it. Most of all, I've remembered that my instincts are not flaws. They are warnings. The moments when my stomach tightened, when his phone tilted away, when his stories didn't line up, those weren't paranoia. They were truth trying to claw its way out. I won't silence that voice again. Because if there's one thing this entire disaster has taught me, it's this. If someone flies you out to paradise but hides another life there, you were never the destination. You were just the cover story. And I refuse to be anyone's cover story ever again. So, no, I don't hate him. I don't wish him well either. I simply don't think of him at all. He doesn't get to occupy my mind, my heart, or my future. And as for me, I'm learning that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it looks like breathing deeply, standing tall, and saying, never again. Because I'd rather be alone in truth than loved in lies.